right, good morning, everyone. We're on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. We're continuing with evidence today, the state with its case in chief. I'll note the jurors are all present, properly seated, and all have signed their juror affirmation. So the court again extends its appreciation for following the court's instruction each day. We will continue with evidence this morning. Apologies for getting started a little bit late. We took up an evidentiary matter outside the presence of the jury and made a ruling on that. So the court will note the defendant is here present with counsel, the state's here present, and also the prosecutors. And at this time, we concluded with a witness yesterday at the end of the day. So I believe the state intends to call another witness this morning. Who will be examining the witness?
I will be, Your Honor. And based upon your ruling just a moment ago, we changed our witness order. He's coming up, and he might just be a minute getting to the courtroom.
Okay, we'll go ahead and wait for the witness to appear. Who will the witness be that's going to be on direct?
Yeah, the state will call Steve Schultz.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wixom.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you. All right, I'm going to just inquire of the witness, Mr. Schultz. Now that you've been placed under oath, there is a order in this case prohibiting witnesses from viewing trial testimony before they testify. I'll note that the trial is being live streamed and also open for public attendance. Mr. Schultz, have you observed or viewed any of the trial testimony in the case?
I've not viewed anything.
Okay, and have you discussed with anyone else the testimony they've given in the case?
No.
Okay, thank you for that affirmation. Mr. Wixom, you can begin your direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Schultz.
Good morning.
Could you please state and spell your full name for the record?
It's Stephen R. Schultz. Stephen, S-T-E-V-E-N, R, S-C-H-U-L-T-Z.
Thank you. And where do you live?
Springville, Utah.
And are you currently retired?
Yes, I am.
When did you retire?
I retired in 2022. Correct, yeah.
And prior to retiring, what is it that you did for a living?
I worked for 25 years with the state of Utah in the Child Support Enforcement Division. And for the last, well, from 2010 to 2022, I worked for two separate mortuaries in Springville.
And what did you do for the mortuaries?
I was a funeral director, also an embalmer, and
did you do that for the entire approximate 12 years?
Yes.
And I want to ask, do you know Chad Daybell?
I do.
How do you know him?
Chad and I were neighbors from when we moved into the ward or into the neighborhood. That was in 2006. I had purchased my parents' home, who passed away, and Chad lived two doors down from me.
And when you said neighborhood, is that in Springville?
Yes, in Springville.
So approximately how many years did you live as neighbors with Mr. Daybell?
Until they left for Idaho, I believe it was 2015, at the end of the school year.
Approximately 9 years?
Yeah.
And what about the rest of his family? Did you know his wife, Tammy?
I did, yes.
And what about his children?
Yes.
How well would you say that you knew the family?
Very well. We were neighbors. We attended the same church together. We had many conversations and worked together, both in the funeral industry as well as Just basic good neighbors.
Would you consider yourself friends?
Yes.
You just mentioned that you work together in the industry. What work did Chad do that you're referring to?
Chad worked for I believe both Springville and Spanish Fork cemeteries. He was the sexton. And
Could you just briefly explain what did he do as a sexton? What was his role?
as a sexton, he would take care of the cemetery. He would basically assist us in the funerals when we arrived for a graveside service. He would open and close the graves. Yeah, and so there was a lot of free time that we had to talk and a lot of share stories and stuff while the funeral burial was going on.
Thank you. And I want to draw your attention back to October 19th of 2019. Did you learn of the passing of Tammy Daybell?
I did.
How did you learn that?
The first I'd heard is that Jason Gwilliam, a neighbor, contacted me and said that Tammy had passed away, and that's the first I'd heard of it. That was on a Saturday.
Did you later hear from Chad Daybell that
I
day?
did. Yes, a few hours later, he called me and wanted to know if I would be willing to bring Tammy back home to Springville and take care of the services down here. And I said, be honored to.
Why did you feel that way?
Because this is a good family. The Daybells were a solid rock in our community. They, in our exact neighborhood, there were 5 members of the same family in that vicinity. And I thought highly of all of them.
You mentioned the name Jason. A moment ago.
Yes,
Were you aware, was Chad acquainted with Jason?
I would hope so. He was his brother-in-law.
And why did you contact Jason to come with you?
A lot of times people would like to assist in the funeral services other than just being a silent participant. When there's an opportunity, I like to get the family members involved. And plus, it was a long drive from Springville to Rexburg and back in the same day. And I would really appreciate someone who could also help me drive and do that whole thing. So I asked Jason. He says he would love to do that.
So did you, in fact, go to Rexburg?
Yes, we did.
What day did you do that?
We did that the following day, Sunday morning, is when we left.
About what time did you arrive in Rexburg?
It was, I want to say 9 or 10, somewhere around that, because we had to. It's a 4.5, 5 hour drive, and yeah, so we arrived at that time.
Where did you first go when you came to Idaho?
We went directly to the house.
Whose house?
To Chad's house, Chad and Tammy's house.
And when you arrived there, who was at the home?
There was obviously, of course, Chad and his oldest son Garth, and his Chad's parents.
Did you talk to Chad?
I did, yeah.
Can you explain to the jury what that conversation was, please?
Basically, I went up to approach him, gave him a hug, and said, "I am so sorry for your loss. This was a devastating blow to him, I'm sure, and as it was for me to know that someone as young as Tammy had passed away."
Did you have a conversation with him about how Tammy had passed?
I did.
What was that conversation?
I just asked him. I says, "What had happened?" And he said that she had been experiencing some difficulty with breathing, and she went to bed that night. And then when he woke up at some time during the evening or the morning, I'm not sure when because I wasn't there, that she had passed. She passed away. I believe he found her on the floor, and then he called Garth in to help lift his mom back into the bed. And that's what he told me.
Did he say anything to you about conversations that he had had with the coroner?
He did. I asked him who the attending physician was, and he said, "Well, we had the county coroner come, and the county coroner had already been there and left before we arrived. And he said the county coroner said that it appears that she may have died from an embolism. And then she just, like I said, she left after that. I did ask Chad if they were going to do an autopsy, which is usually a case when there's not an attending physician there. But in this case, the county coroner was the person in charge at that point and made the decisions as to that she could go ahead and be embalmed.
Did Chad express to you whether or not he wanted an autopsy?
He did not want an autopsy.
Did he say that in so many words, or how did he express that
That's
to you?
pretty much it. Yeah, he says, I asked him, he says, are they going to do an autopsy to find out? Because, it might be for heredity's sake. Children might want to know how their mother passed away, and so they could, watch for symptoms, signs, stuff like that. But so basically the words were, no, I do not want her to have an autopsy.
What other things do you recall discussing with Chad that morning?
I always come prepared when I'm especially going a long distance like that. I'll bring the booklets that I need. I'll bring a casket book so they can pick out caskets. I try to do all that in the home so they don't have to make a secondary trip into the mortuary to make those arrangements. So most of the arrangements were done by the time we left the place, as far as choosing a casket, choosing a vault, choosing a place where they're going to be buried. Putting together a program was still left open because all things happened very quickly.
When you say very quickly, what do you mean by that?
Quickly meaning that he wanted to have the funeral service as soon as possible. And this was on a Sunday morning. And I said, well, with social media, we need to have word get around so that the people will know, so that you'll have somebody showing up at the funeral. And even announcing in the newspaper, there's deadlines to meet. And so he said he wanted to get this done just as quickly as he could. His words, not mine.
What was his proposed funeral schedule?
He wanted to do it as quickly as he could. I think there was some discussion of even possibly doing it Monday, but that was very quick. We talked about it, and he said, we'll do the viewing on Monday. And we came to a reasonable conclusion that the funeral on Tuesday would probably suffice.
In your experience as a funeral director, would you say that scheduling was in the norm?
No, usually there's a 3-4 day time period between the death and the funeral. Sometimes up to a week. So there have been funerals that we've not held for weeks.
And why do you typically at least have 3 or 4 days? What's the reason for that?
The preparation to get things ready for the funeral, like I said, to ascertain information for the death certificates, to get programs together and gathered, letting people know, setting up the church, putting the Relief Society in motion so that they can have the luncheon prepared. It can be done in a few couple of days, but for the most part, just to give them the opportunity.
Did you notice anything about Chad's demeanor and tone when you were interacting with him planning the funeral arrangements?
When I was there, of course, when I gave him the hug, he was teary, and he just lost his wife. But it just seemed like there was a business-like atmosphere about it, which could be either a person's way of dealing with grief, or it could be, I want to get this thing done and over with. In fact, I believe the direct words to me were, I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to drag this whole process out. I says, okay, we'll work hard and try to get it done by Tuesday.
Did he happen to articulate any reasons why he didn't want to drag it out?
No, I just wanted to, I think it was just for, because that's sometimes is a long time to wait to bury somebody, maybe 3 days, 5 days, 1 week, 10 days, whatever, before the service. He didn't want to have the hoopla of that going on.
So when you finished talking to Chad, making these arrangements, what did you do next?
At that point, when we were all finished with the arrangements, we moved over then to contact the mortician who actually picked Tammy up and did the embalming. It was Flam Funeral Home in Rexburg. I made a phone call to Mr. Flam indicating that we were finished at Chad's house and that we would like to pick Tammy up and bring her back to Springville. And so he left his church meeting that he was in attendance to there, and we met him at the mortuary, his mortuary.
Is that a normal thing when there's a deceased that needs to go to another state? Do you normally contact a local mortuary?
Yes, we call that a trade embalming, where they will do the first call when they get the first notification of death. They will go ahead and embalm and then prepare whatever they need to, and then they contact the family will then contact a mortuary to come in, and whoever's going to be doing the service, which in this case was Chad, and he called me directly.
And I'm just going to ask the witness, could you slow down a bit?
Sure.
Our court reporter, you're talking pretty quickly. It's fine. You're articulate, but for the reporter's sake, if we could just slow down the pace.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So when you arrived at Flam's, what did you do?
We met Mr. Flam, and he directed me to the dressing room, which we call it. It's just the room outside the embalming room, and he assisted me in moving Tammy from the table over to the cot that I had brought up so that we could transport her back home.
Did you make any observations of Tammy at that point?
Just a quick glance, because I'm concerned as well that this was a sudden death. I understand that she was sick, but somebody that young is usually physically enough to overcome it. But I wasn't there during her convalescence. So
when you say that you understand she was sick, how did you have that understanding?
I talked to Jason and indicated that that's what he was told the same thing, but I actually heard that directly from Chad as well. She was not feeling well. She had a chronic cough. She was sick, yeah.
So your understanding of her sickness was from the information provided by Chad. Is that fair?
Yes.
And you said something a moment ago I'd like you to comment more to the jury on. You said you looked at the body because you were concerned. Can you explain the concern that you had?
Whenever there's somebody who's passed away without the doctors being there to handle that, I'm always really leery of things such as, well, I don't want to have an autopsy. I don't want to drag this thing out. And there were already some red flags that I had encountered prior to her passing away, that just there was a cause of suspicion for me, and not suspicion, concern. I wanted to find out if she had fallen, if there was anything wrong with Tammy. Flam Funeral Home actually did an excellent job in the embalming process. And I just glanced at her just briefly, checking for any type of broken bones, marks on the face, on the neck, on the arms, on the torso, because she was there, and in the process of moving, we did see her entire body, but I saw absolutely nothing that I could determine. I'm not a medical examiner. I don't know.
So in fairness, you found nothing that you thought would be suspicious.
I found nothing there that would be suspicious, that would lead to my suspicions, but because of the red flags, it just, something wasn't sitting well with me.
Other than, I don't want to drag it out, I don't want an autopsy, was there anything else causing red flags for you?
The speed of the trial, the speed of the funeral.
Okay.
No.
And eventually you did transport Tammy's body back to Springville.
We did. Jason, William, and myself transferred her all the way back to Springville.
And without stating anything that Jason said, did you have
Live
a discussion?
updates on day 12 of the Chad Daybell trial. Chad Daybell is accused of murder in the deaths of his wife, Lori Vallow's children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, as well as the death of his first wife, Tammy Daybell. On Thursday, April 25th, there were 2 witnesses called to the stand, with one taking a majority of the day. The court started by recalling Vincent Kayakamanu, who served as a detective on the case. His testimony took most of the day. The second witness the prosecution called was the technology director for the school district Tammy Daybell worked at before her death. Spencer Cook testified in regard to Gmail emails from Charles Vallow, warning Tammy of infidelity. Defense did not cross-examine this witness, and he was excused right before 3 p.m. on Thursday. Court wrapped up shortly after to allow the state to call a new witness Friday morning. The state also recalled a witness for the first time in this trial on Wednesday by recalling Vincent Kayakamanu. The first time he testified, it was focused on the finding of the children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. This time, his testimony focused more on Tammy Daybell and her health before her death. There was also an evidentiary motion hearing after court hours on Wednesday, with Judge Stephen Boyce hearing both sides of the argument. He provided his rulings on Thursday morning before the jury was brought in. Tuesday, however, was the first day Chad Daybell was visibly emotional in court, as the testimony and images from Officer Alyssa Garenhall showed Tammy Daybell deceased, with pinkish foam coming from her mouth. Chad Daybell appeared to cry a bit upon this testimony, showing some semblance of care for her. Court left off on Thursday with the state needing to call another witness. However, the state had warned Judge Stephen Boyce that the next witness will take some time, so they waited to call until the next day. Court is expected to wrap up about an hour earlier on Friday, April 26th. The trial is expected to last another 4 to 6 weeks.